The Day the World Was Saved, a short story for young adult readers set in the universe of Maidens of Zombie Kingdom by J. Wilburn. Princess Darn never expected to be a warrior trying to save her kingdom from a new undead threat, but it is up to her and her new friends to save everyone. That's a blurb for the book itself. If you like what you read, check out the Maidens of Zombie Kingdom young adult fantasy trilogy. Shell and her little brother Clem ran to the top of the next hill. It was true. The sun had come up and the sky was full of light and color. She couldn't believe it. Shell had heard stories the entire 10 years of her life about sunrises, but she never thought she'd live to see one. Stories were that sunsets at the end of the day were just as lovely, and the sky at night would be filled with stars. The world was completely different now. It's like colored chalks, only brighter, Clem said as he huffed and puffed beside his big sister. She almost laughed at him, but she remained too stunned beyond words, beyond sound. She never imagined the world could be like this. The Dark King had been brought down, and the shadow he cast across the land was pulled back with him. Clem pointed straight up as the sun turned from pink to more of an orange-yellow color. Shell blinked several times and looked away. The sun was too bright to stare directly at anymore. Amazing. Clem still pointed as he looked up and asked, "What color is that?" Shell finished blinking away the spots and said, "I think that's blue. Yes, I believe that is blue." "There's more of it," Clem said, jumping up and down. "I think the sky is getting bluer." Amazing. All the colors grew from more vivid as the sun climbed into the sky like a yellow-white ball of fire, too bright to look at any longer. All the leaves on trees, bushes, and vines were green, really green, not just gray with hints of green around the edges. And they were all different greens. Some were light green. Other leaves were darker but deep and vivid green. Others were a green so rich they almost looked wet. The animal skins they wore had different shades of brown, too. They were light brown in some patches and darker brown through other lines. Amazing. "I want to see him," Clem said. Shell felt cold inside at her brother's words, even under the bright sun giving off incredible heat. It was like the air was warming up, but it was her brother she thought about. All right, hold on. Let me refresh something here that froze up on me. All right, we're still good. All right. "What are you talking about, boy?" "I want to go see him before they bury him out in the field of power." Shell swallowed several times. "They're not burying the Dark King, they're sealing him in a magic tomb piled under all the spells from all the magic users in all the villages. They never want him to come out. That's what you do with evil, and he is the most evil being ever to live." "Yes, I want to see him," Clem said. Shell sighed and put her hands on her hips as she stared down into his eager face. "You are crazy. He is still dangerous even now. Until they put him in the ground under all those spells they can think of. Even then, we might not be completely safe. The elders are talking of moving the village further away." "I still want to see him," Clem said. "You're a fool, boy. Go back to the village and enjoy the sunlight under the blue sky." "I'm going to see." "No, you are not. Mom and Mother's sister are there casting spells now, and they told us to stay away. Go back home before I club you." "Club me if you want to." He stuck out his chin and chest. "But I know you are going to look for yourself. You'll take me with you, or I will tell." Even as Shell sweated in the morning sun, she got that cold shiver through her again. How did he know? Clem was going to be more trouble than she expected. "You don't run fast enough. You'll get caught, and then we'll all be in trouble." Clem said, "I can run. I'm going. You can go back to the village." "Fine, we'll go together, but stay quiet." They traveled out through the woods, watching how the light dazzled between the leaves in a billion sparkles of light. As they walked out in the fields, they got down and crawled through the grass that was green at the bottom and yellow at the top. They crawled to the crest of the hill and looked out across the plains to a steep rocky hill that didn't used to be there. "They're burying him in that?" Clem asked. "Sealing him," Shell said. "Now stay quiet." They saw their mother and aunt among the other magic users surrounding the new stony hill. Most of them were women, but there were a few men too. They chanted in languages Shell didn't know, and they talked over each other. "There's a hole in the top of the hill. Is he down there?" "I don't know. Be quiet." Hours passed and the chanting continued. I'm hungry and tired. Can we go back? Clem asked. Shell wanted to snap at him, but she was hungry and tired too. Come on. Food tasted better. The dried meat was saltier and richer. Greens had a tang to them Shell never noticed before. Even the water from the well tasted fresher. Could all this have been because the Dark King being brought down? Amazing. Sunset was brilliant, maybe more spectacular than sunrise. And the stars. The sky was awash with stars. Even night was beautiful. When the sun rose again, Shell decided sunrise was more brilliant than sunset. It had to be. Their mother did not return that night and wasn't home in the morning either. Shell had to see about breakfast herself from the stores. Grain cakes rose higher and fluffier than she had ever gotten them before. With their mother out, it was just the two of them. Their father had died long ago, not long after Clem was born. Like many others, he fell to the terrible armies of the evil Dark King, whom many thought would rule the world forever. Oh, if their father could have lived to see this. I want to go see her, Clem said. Shell nodded, and they returned to their hill. They got there in time to see the body lowered into the tomb. He was as big as any 3 men. It took a dozen people to carry him. With the world full of color, the Dark King looked colorless. He, not dark at all, but stark white, with lines of cracked blue through his flesh like he had been frozen. A glimpse of hand, a massive foot. Then the body vanished inside. All day, objects were taken down into the tomb. All manner of wards and charms dropped until Shell expected them to overflow the top. And the chanting continued all day. Their mother stood next to their aunt. Blonde hair as bright as gold in the light of the new world danced around her head in a halo. Against the warmth of the sun, the wind blew cold from the direction of the Dark King's tomb. Shell? Yes, she didn't make him finish. Let's go. She was wrong. Sunset was more brilliant. It had to be. She woke up so refreshed. She never remembered sleep moving so well before. Surely this had to be in her head. Their mother still wasn't home. How long? Clem rubbed his eyes. I don't know. There were grain cakes left over from the previous morning, and as she expected, they tasted better than any day-old grain cakes ever had in the history of the world. Can we? Maybe one more time, Shell said, and they went. The magic user stood closer to the base of the tomb's hill, and that gave Shell a chill that had nothing to do with the cold wind. Others on top of the hill moved a great stone into place. It slid inch by inch over the hole, and Shell thought she would go mad waiting for this to be over. Between each movement of the great capstone, the chanting of spells overlapping spells continued. Shell, just be still a moment. Another hour passed. Shell, fine, we can. The stone crashed into place and the entire world shook. Black crystals formed around the seal. The chanting continued. The lines of black crystals snaked down the hill from the cap. Some of the chants tapered off, but others cried out their spells even louder. The blackness reached the base of the hill and spread across the ground. The magic users fell silent and backed away. The ones on top of the hill started running down the slope through the loose stones. Brilliant grass turned from green-yellow to stark white. Then it wilted into nothing as the blackness spread in a near-solid sheet from the base of the hill. Darkness was something Shell should have been well familiar with, even in the fresh new brightness of the world. There was something wrong with this black, though. It was black within black. It was darker than night. It was darker than nothingness. It was too black to look at. All texture vanished once this deepest blackness painted itself over the ground. One by one, the men running down the hill burst. They came apart into a dry spray of particles and then vanished entirely on the wind like so much pollen. The magic users screamed and ran as the blackness spread out behind them, obliterating the plain as it went. The gray stone on the tomb hill remained as a floating pocket of color in a field of blackness, with the veins of darkness coming down its slope from the sealed capstone. Some of the magic users tripped and the darkness caught them. Ebony crystals crawled over their flesh, first turning them into oily statues, but then swallowing them into the void. Gone. Their aunt tripped and their mother's golden hair flipped around as she went back for her. Mother! Clem stood on the grassy hill, and their mother turned to him from the distance with eyes wide. She cried out, "Run, go!" Their aunt screamed as the blackness washed over her, and she was snuffed out of existence. The blackness spread under their mother's feet, and crystals crackled up her legs. She spread her arms and cried, "Shell, get him out of here. Don't stop. Overrun it. Keep going until you overrun this final curse." Her face turned shadow and then midnight. Her body, frozen in darkness, sank into the true black to be consumed forever. Her face turned Mother, Clem lunged for the spreading black, but Shell dragged him the other way, down the back of the hill. When he wouldn't cooperate, she hauled her brother onto her shoulder and ran headlong through the forest with him still screaming for their mother. More screams rose behind them. Then the trees started exploding into dust. Eventually, Clem was willing to run on his own. Once she did not have to carry him, a great weight settled on her heart. Tears threatened to blur her vision as her lungs burned from running and her heart ached for her mother and aunt. The village was cut off. Others made it out before it too was no more, but not everyone. Shell and Clem became part of a growing pilgrimage of many villages trying to stay ahead of the hungry darkness of the Dark King's final curse. The blackness had slowed after covering a large portion of the region. The creeping white death that wilted every plant and tree continued to spread beyond the edge of the blackness. It too began to slow. Over the next hill, Clem pointed at a line of bright green trees far beyond the wilted edge of the whiteness. "Can we make it that far, Shell?" "We can and we will." She kept her eyes fixed on those trees as they left the deepest black and white wilt behind. Clem talked about their mother, and Shell let him. It just made her sadder, but he needed it, so she let him talk. Her eyes were on the green under the impossible bright sun. Sunrise was the most beautiful. It had to be. This morning they approached the stratified mesas that were striped along their sides with as many different colored stones as there were shades in the sunrise. All this rose from a sea of green grasses and trees. So much green. "I wish Mother and Father were here to see this," Clem said. She placed an arm around his shoulders, and they kept walking. The Dark King's last act of evil could not touch that light, and it couldn't swallow all the green either. She whispered, "Amazing."